Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. Are you a solar developer that is ready to make a real difference? Then you need to hear about the Department of Energy's American-made Community Power Accelerator Prize. That's right, we're talking 25 teams will get up to $400,000 each in cash awards to help develop community-benefiting solar projects. Think community solar projects, resilient microgrids, behind-the-meter VPPs, and even multi-family commercial industrial projects that empower neighborhoods. Round 3 of this competition is open to new and expanding solar developers and community organizations that have a portfolio of 2 or more distributed solar projects that meet the prize criteria. This is your chance. But hurry, the deadline's December 17th. Reach out to Jade Garrett with Positive Deviancy, a power connector for the American-made challenges, to get free support to apply. We'll have more about this on the notes of the podcast. You could also email Jade. Her email is jade, Jade, at positivedeviancy.com. positivedeviancy.com, and that's her website as well, www.positivedeviancy.com, positivedeviancy.com. Thank you. Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I wanted to invite you to an event that we're having on Wednesday, December 4th from 6 to 10 p.m. at Hudson Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey. It's our winter solstice fundraiser. Join Reneu Energy, Positive Deviancy, and the Solar Maverick Podcast. We will be also raising funds for the Let's Share the Sun Foundation, which we've had twice on the Solar Maverick Podcast, which aids impoverished communities in harnessing solar energy. If you're interested in sponsoring the event, please feel free to reach out to us at info@reneuenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. If you want more information on this event, we'll have it on the notes of the podcast, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for listening.
This is a direct quote. As president, I will set a national goal of ensuring America has the #1 lowest cost of energy of any industrial country anywhere on earth. Because why? Because he wants to bring manufacturing back, and keeping energy low is key to getting manufacturers. Of course, that means there's going to be a wide variety of things. But I think most rational people agree that this is a complex problem.
Hello and welcome to the Solar Maverick Podcast, where solar meets entrepreneurship and experience. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan, so let's get into it.
Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I'm really excited to have Nate Jovanelly. He will be co-hosting this episode of the Solar Maverick Podcast, where we discuss our post-election analysis and how that will impact the renewable energy industry. Nate is the CEO and founder of Sunraise Capital. He has been on 13 episodes of the Solar Maverick Podcast. Welcome, Nate, to the podcast. It's always great having you. We always get great feedback when both of us do an episode, and it's great to see you. How are things, Nate?
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's great to be here. I always enjoy talking solar with you. So, the pleasure's mine.
Yeah, definitely. Nate and I could go on for hours and hours about it. Whenever we're together, it's just amazing conversation. And I always learn a lot from our conversations, Nate, and getting Nate's unique perspective on the industry. Nate, it would be great if you could tell our audience about your company, Sunraise Capital. I know you premiered our podcast, which I appreciate, like the Sunraise first started the company. Now it's been almost a year and a half. It would be great to talk to, as you know, Solar Maverick Podcast about solar and entrepreneurship. So it'd be great to hear how things are going with your business.
Yeah, it's going great. Just a few bullet points, I guess, for those listening. So really, prior to the IRA, the biggest barrier to entry to solar ownership was the tax credit, and that changed with the IRA. So what Sunraise is doing, we're looking to revolutionize how solar gets financed. So we want to simplify the investment process, allow non-institutional investors who can now participate. So whether you're a family office, high net worth, or ultra high net worth individual, you can now bring your capital, use our tools. We make everything easy and capture significant tax benefits, including the federal investment tax credit and bonus depreciation, while also generating strong, predictable cash flow. So if you think about, again, just the evolution here, this isn't new. What's new is how tax credits are monetized effectively. In the last 15 years, there's been billions and billions of dollars invested in used to finance residential solar, right? I started with the Inflation Reduction Act, really has done a few different things. One, it's increased the credits from 30 to upwards of 50% or 60%. There's multiple adders to get more tax credit. And it opened up the tax credit market to who can monetize these tax credits. And what we offer is a tech-enabled platform to connect investors to bespoke financial structures so they can offset their tax while, again, generating long-term cash flow. So generally, installers prefer our platform because we can pay more than what others can because we're leaner. We also just been in the solar tech space for a long time, and I think we've built a better mousetrap for third-party ownership or solar leases.
Thank you, Nate. That's great that you explained that. And Nate started IGS's first solar division, then residential financing, and grew it to many megawatts. I forget what the number is, Nate, but
it's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you explaining how you differentiate from other residential solar financiers. We'll have Nate's contact information in the notes of the podcast and the website link to sunraise.com. And it's interesting because you talked about basically in the IRA, basically the transferability of the clean energy tax credit, which was a lot more complicated. Before, you had to do these complicated structures, partnership flips, sale leaseback, inverted lease, which were complicated and also very costly, right? The legal fees related to doing these types of transactions. And in the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, it made it a lot simpler to basically transfer those tax credits to, and has opened the market to other entities than just like financial institution and large tech companies.
Yeah. And installers as well. We've done a few mini funds, I would call them, that are installer owned, where you can control everything. So you bring capital and everything's in your control. We'll help with contracts and all of that. But ultimately, you control the AVL, payment schedule, so on and so forth. And it really, when you are an installer and you have control over the financing and you have that lever to pull, it really makes it easy to win some of those competitive deals.
Yeah, for sure. And as you know, like these deals are tight. So any way that you could innovate, right, and lower cost, that'll really differentiate you from the competition. So I'm really excited for you, Nate. And, maybe you should have me on the advisory board one day.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this podcast, as I said, is our post-election analysis. If you listen to our last podcast, which was RE Plus takeaways, we actually talked about post-election results if President Trump won the re-election. This podcast is actually done on November 13th, 2024. It's been approximately 8 days since the election. President Trump has won the presidential election by a landslide by, the Electoral College. And even if you look at popular vote, and he won all the swing states. So, obviously he has a mandate from the people. And Nate, wanted to get your initial thoughts on his reelection and obviously the second term of the Trump administration and how that will impact renewables.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And certainly there are people, I'll preface this, that are much closer to policy than I am. But I'm sure you've had me on because I'm probably going to take maybe not contrarian view to what others say, but I'm certainly less fearful than others. I think there's a lot of fear mongering right now. And it's particularly, as you noted, if you look at the stock market and how the renewable energy stocks are trading, it's like, oh, the sky is falling, right? Everyone's putting out these different webinars and press releases and different things. But I just want to call attention to a few facts. And I had all this data pulled before Solar Wake Up this morning, but I want to give them a shout out because it was awesome this morning. If you don't subscribe to Solar Wake Up, you should. Well, can you put the link in the notes? I don't know it off the top of my head.
Of the Solar Wake Up, that's by Jan Brandt. He used to have a podcast as well, but he comes up with the Solar Wake Up, which is every morning. By the way, I copied and pasted the facts that he did as well this morning when I was prepping for our call, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah. I just wanted to give him a shout out because I thought it was really well done. And I had some other facts written down prior to reading that this morning. But I just wanted to elaborate a little bit. And again, some of them will overlap what was in that daily press cycle there from Jan. But so in 2016, before Trump took office, there was 14.6 gigawatts installed of solar that year. Not cumulative, that in 2016 was installed. Cumulative, there were 40. Fast forward to 2020, there was 19.2 and 74. And in 2021, there was 23.6 gigawatts and 92.5 gigawatts cumulative. Okay, so you don't have to remember all those numbers. All you need to know is that in 2021, it was the third year in a row that solar was the largest share of new capacity in the US. Those are all Trump years. I also want to point out, as I did in the last podcast that everyone overlooks, and you can break it down to however you want, but the fact is that Trump did extend the tax credit. So that's the empirical, right? If you want to look at the anecdotal, and I didn't look this up, somebody can fact check it, I would guess that more solar companies have gone out in the last 2 years than all 4 years under former President Trump from 2017 to 2021. I mean, look, especially in the resi space where I'm mostly focused, the amount of companies that have gone out of business and large companies that are national players, whether it's a SunPower or ADT Solar. I mean, we could go on and on and on, right? Just to name a few. But there have been a lot of companies that have gone out of business. And this is, frankly, one of the worst years for residential solar. And you can think of it as, okay, why? There's a lot of interesting thoughts around that. I still think solar's poised to do extremely well going into the future. You know, I think a majority of Americans support it. I think in that, you know, in Solar Wake Up, he had said 86 or 87%. I don't remember the exact number, but I agree. Generally, it's a vast majority of Americans support solar. So if these things didn't happen 4 years ago, I just don't know why everyone's so scared they're going to happen now. So, but I want to keep following this rabbit trail and I'll let you respond. But if you look at, according to MIT, 85% of investment from the IRA has been in Republican congressional districts. So we're talking about manufacturing. What does Trump want to do? He wants to bring manufacturing to this country, right? He wants to bring it back, whether it's automotive or other. And his cornerstone for that, and this is a direct quote, as president, I will set a national goal of ensuring American has the #1 lowest cost of energy of any industrial country anywhere on earth. Because why? Because he wants to bring manufacturing back, and keeping energy low is key to getting manufacturers. Now, of course, that means there's going to be a wide variety of things. But I think most rational people agree that this is a complex problem. You need a wide variety of fuel, whether it's gas peakers or nuclear, even, you know, for that base load. You need all these things working together. But I don't see anything anywhere that President Trump has said that would lead me to believe that solar is going to be a target. We'll see. I could be wrong. These are just facts, right? So if we believe that solar is the lowest cost of energy, then we want to get the US to the lowest cost of energy. I don't know what all the fear is about, but maybe I'm just an overall optimistic person.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fear is more about what he said during the campaign about removing the incentives related to renewables in the Inflation Reduction Act. But I think it's different once you're campaigning and then actually doing something about it. As you mentioned, like a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act incentives for renewables are helping Republican states, specifically on the manufacturing. So I think there's a difference between what he says during the campaign and then what he actually is going to do. I mean, there could be some changes to the Inflation Reduction Act because they can go back and change it, but I don't think you're going to see a complete dismantling of the incentives because it is helping spur the economy through growth. And it's interesting too, like what you mentioned about a lot of solar companies going out of business. And part of it is a high interest rate environment, right? That you have for infrastructure projects, high historical, right? It's been low for so long. Obviously, it was challenging. And then I think with the IRA, it took so much time, right, for us to get, I mean, we're still trying to understand, right? That was past August of 2022. We're still trying to understand the incentives, right? And getting guidance. So I think it led to like not a lot of activity happening. And then, as you know, Nate, like California was really impacted by the change in from NEM 2.0 to 3.0. It's NEM 2.0. Is it 3.0? I can't even remember.
3.0. Yeah.
So that led to a lot of resi companies going out of business because they basically changed the economics of these projects pretty dramatically in a very short period of time. So,
How does California vote?
Democratic usually.
Okay.
Obviously.
There's already been 18 Republican Congress members. It might even be higher that are saying that they don't want to dismantle the IRA because it will be, quote, bad for business. Trump is pro-business. Okay. So I would say the things that are on my radar is the EV tax credit. I don't think he's a fan of. So that one I think could be at risk. And again, he runs a lot on manufacturing, in this case, bringing auto industry back. And I think he sees that tax credit as a hindrance to that overall hierarchy. The other thing I would say is, and if you listen to JD Vance or Trump on Joe Rogan, Vance didn't say anything negative about solar, but they're both not huge fans of wind. So I would say that wind would also be on my radar. I'd be looking close at that. But it would be counter to their goals, I think, to totally dismantle it, especially when it comes to solar. I do think that they're going to open up some areas probably to drill. And if you look at, I think I talked about this in the last podcast, I certainly post on LinkedIn all the time. Cost of household energy is outpacing the overall consumer price index. Like, energy inflation is really high. And guess what? If energy costs more, everything costs more. And you can just look at your own household energy bill. And what is driving this? It's a whole bunch of things. It's obviously aging infrastructure, but it's also a massive, massive increase in demand. I'm not sure that we can get there anyway with just renewables, with these AI data centers and all this other stuff that's coming online. And it usually comes online, again, in the areas that have cheap power. And my fear would be that we can't keep up with the demand of energy. I believe I talked in the last one, the PJM auction was like record for new generation, like super high. I've been reading articles up and down the East Coast warning about the grid only has a few more years before it gets to some critical point where there could be rolling blackouts like you see out west. So I'm not sure that any, again, rational person wouldn't say, yeah, we need a bigger energy mix if we're going to accomplish the kind of economic growth and bring back manufacturing to this country. That's just my opinion. I'm sure there's people out there that might disagree. But ultimately, I believe that we need a good mix of energy sources. I still think, and I believe solar is one of the cheapest forms of energy. I think Trump, if anything, might get rid of some of the other policies that stand in the way of permitting and large scale solar. I think there could be some side effects there. No one's talking about bonus depreciation, right? We're all talking about just the federal investment tax credit. But I would say he hasn't said this, but I wouldn't be shocked if he keeps bonus depreciation because it does step down in 2025 from 60 to 40%. So there's all these other things in the mix, right? That I think people just look and go, oh, Republican bad. Oh, Trump bad. And why I started the conversation the way I did is because if you just look at data and facts don't lie. And if you look at the data suggested that solar had one of its best periods during the Trump administration. Again, now I'm sure there's somebody out there, I always have to caveat on these things, that will say, oh, that was policies that were set up in the previous administration. Sure, you could say that, oh, all these companies are going out of business under Biden because of actions of Trump. I don't see that. I would love to talk to them about it, what they see that would lead them to that conclusion. Because what I see is that tax credit was extended under both parties. I saw horrible tariffs under this current administration that's in office now. I mean, we talk about tariffs and it's going to cripple companies. And that's why some of these publicly traded stocks are down because it's going to add cost. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on every tariff that's been instilled, but I know there's been a lot of talk about all the things, again, the current administration has done that I wouldn't say has been super friendly in terms of cost. So again, we're going to need more power. And if we all believe that renewables are the best, lowest cost form of energy in this country, then no one should have anything to worry about, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the long-term story is still there no matter what anyone says. Solar is the cheapest form of electricity. It's going to continue to get cheaper because it's a technology, not a fuel. energy storage, which is important because it makes it base load instead of intermittent power for renewables. That's going to keep going lower in price. As you mentioned, energy demand in the US and all over the world is going to increase exponentially with data centers, AI, even mining, crypto mining, and energy usage. So, we're at a point where we need as much generation as we could get. I know they've been talking about obviously keeping old plants, running longer periods of time. We talked about 3 Mile Island on the last one with the RE plus takeaways. There's also been talks about modular nuclear plants. So I think no matter what, energy prices are going to continue to go up. And there's nothing, I don't know, there has to be really an amazing innovations to be able to, for it not to go up, right? And at the aging infrastructure and all these things. And obviously, the more costly energy is, that's one of the biggest costs for businesses. So, that will hurt growth. So we have to figure out like some of these things that are really slowing the pace of new construction, right? Nate mentioned about the interconnection queues, permitting, even materials and supplies. It's interesting because JD Vance was talking about, the future vice president, about the challenges of getting transformers, which has been an issue within the solar industry, that we have to figure out how to be able to make transformers faster. You're right, the long term is still in play. Obviously, a lot of people in the industry, I guess, are surprised by the outcome. And, I think there's still a lot of positive that solar is here to stay. And this is just part of, we're going to have to adjust like we always have. That's part of the solar roller coaster that we've all been on for a very long time. But at the end of the day, the long-term economics are there, and we have to adjust based on the new administration. The Loan Program Office, which was very active during the Biden administration, was dormant in the last Trump presidency. So I think we probably will see the same thing with the new Trump administration. So there are going to be things that are adjustments, and we just have to be more creative and be more disciplined and work together, right, to come up with better solutions than we have.
Yeah, good. It'll make us better as an industry. Look, I agree with you on the loan front. I'm just speaking holistically here, not reading this off their actual position statement or anything. But generally speaking, Republicans are not in favor of grants and loans as much as they are tax credits. It's my understanding, if you look at the cornerstone of, some policy, that they don't think that the government should be giving out money in that way to advance public businesses, right? And I could understand that. So what I don't think that I've seen historically is that they're just blanket against tax credits, because it's mostly Republicans that use the tax credits. Maybe not anymore. It's hard to say at this point. But these are things that I think, again, if you boil it down, what is that one of the cornerstones of the Republican Party has been energy independence. And how can you do that if solar is making up for years now the largest share of new capacity? I don't think you can just totally neuter it and throw it aside. That would be counter to what they're trying to accomplish. Now, might they drill more? Might there be more competition? Might energy prices come down? I hope, probably. I don't hope about the drilling. Energy prices coming down. One of the things I've always said is, if you really want people to care about the environment, you got to lift them out of poverty. And energy poverty is one of the biggest issues, right? When you look at what it costs for electricity, and we talked about manufacturing, but just think about in the home, like when your energy bill, you can't afford to pay your energy bill. It's hard to care at that point, really, about if your energy is coming from coal or solar or wind or whatever. Okay. They're worried about, can I keep the heat on? Can I get groceries? So if we can make energy cheaper, get more people out of poverty, I think you're going to get more movement then, more people to care. And I already think it's a vast majority about some of the other environmental factors with energy. Again, that's my opinion. I think if you went to somebody, again, that's struggling to get by and you ask them what they think, they're not going to have a strong opinion because they're not an area they have time or the luxury of focusing on, right? So we all want cleaner air and cleaner water. It's been my argument forever, but we got to get people to care, and they can't care if energy prices are outpacing the consumer price index, which is already really high. It's normalized. I think it ticked back up this month, but you get my overarching point, I think, is what I'm trying to drive to. So I think that should be priority number one, is just getting as many people out of poverty as we can in this country. And I think a lot of that, not all of it, but a good component of that is the cost of energy. And sure, where a lot of people in poverty, it's a lot of those rural areas. I think, I'm sure there's some in the city and stuff as well. They usually have more programs and things there, but that's where the manufacturing jobs are coming as well. So when you just look at it in a cycle or circle, it seems that we could be in for, a positive 4 years. I just don't see solar slowing down. Could there be some things that aren't ideal? Sure. You're going to get that with both administrations. I think we already covered that. People don't always look at it that way. But again, I'm just looking at the data of what's happened under both administrations. And sure, the IRA was massive. I agree with you. It took a very long time, I think, to get traction in some regards because there was a lot of things missing in terms of the guidance. So you had to be super risky if you're going to go out on the leading edge because you weren't exactly sure how these things would be counted. But ultimately speaking, from my vantage point, I think those 4 years under the Republican administration were probably better for business in some ways than the last 4. That's just my opinion. People can disagree with it if they want. I'm not even arguing or trying to take a side politically, so I hope it's not coming across that way. I'm just giving facts. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with any administration, there's going to be, different challenges and different restrictions. And, we've experienced it with many different presidential, obviously elections and then in office. So I'll be interesting to see. And I think with the energy transition, right, there's an opportunity for jobs, right? That's what you were mentioning, manufacturing jobs, solar installation jobs. I mean, it's amazing to see how much opportunity can be created because there's so much infrastructure related work that needs to be done. And I think this is a great opportunity for people to get jobs in the energy industry, especially with all this incentives relating to manufacturing, obviously solar energy and other energy resources, energy storage, and then infrastructure as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of appetite for it. And these are positions that can't be outsourced to other countries. So the US workforce, it's going to be a great opportunity for.
And just to be clear, again, we stay on this topic, is the current administration, I'd say their biggest win was in manufacturing, right? If you look at the amount of money invested in manufacturing for renewables in this country post IRA, I mean, it just takes off, right? You get that hockey stick, and the IRA has led to billions upon billions of dollars in clean energy investment. I could look here, like in 2024, it was around just shy of 17 billion, as compared to 2020, it was less than 2 billion. That's massive, right? Massive. I don't want to discount that. But again, back to what I was saying is that 85% of that investment is in Republican congressional districts. So it would be illogical, I think, for Republicans who want jobs in manufacturing, at least they're saying, to then come and gut that portion of the IRA. And what's coupled with that, obviously, is the tax credit adders, one of which that people are already using, and we have multiple installers using, is domestic content. Well, how are you going to do domestic content if you don't make it in the US? So you got to have the manufacturing. And if you don't have the incentive, because guess what? Sorry, it does cost more to make things here currently. There has to be some kind of incentive then for people to use that product versus a cheaper version. And you can do that multiple ways. You can add more tariffs, which has been discussed, and there's already how many, or you can incentivize it through the 10% domestic content adder that was created in the IRA. So again, I think there's still a strong foundation for renewables. I do think this year was particularly challenging, at least in the residential space. It seems like some of the other segments are doing much better, but this is part of the evolution of, as I always say, of anything, any industry that's maturing, because we're still not there yet. We're still not in the early majority. Let's not forget that. Was it 4% of the power, is solar, or 4% of the rooftops have solar? So I think there's still going to be a continued evolution, but I don't see the industry like having a major contraction or going away. There's been a lot of money invested here, and I'm very optimistic about the future of clean energy in the US.
Me as well. I'm really excited about it. I always need to be reminded by you that we're still early in this solar transition or energy transition. Like we've been in it for so long, and it's been amazing to see the exponential growth, but it's going to get even more exponential as time goes on. Obviously, it's interesting. Elon Musk has been very involved in the re-election of President Trump. How do you think having him being there could help or hinder the renewable energy industry?
He's certainly a wild card in some respects, for sure. I think it's funny. He's going to head up calling it the DOGE, the Department of Energy Efficiency, Department of Government Efficiency. That's what it is. So I don't know how much will have to do with energy, but obviously, I mean, if you look at Tesla stock isn't suffering, right? It's almost a meme stock at this point. It's up so much. But when you think about batteries, all of these things, I don't know how much Tesla really cares about solar. I'm not sure anymore. It's hard to say, but they certainly care about batteries and EVs. And like I said, the only thing I've heard negative from the incoming administration is the EV tax credit. I think he's explicitly said that they want to end that. But again, if Musk's in there, then maybe he can have him change his mind there. I'm not sure what Elon's position on it is anymore. I would think that overall he'd be in favor of it because it helps him move more automobiles and remain competitive, I think, against other vehicle types. So look, man, it's certainly going to be interesting. You could also say, again, I don't want to make this too political. So, but RFK is going to be on the administration as well. Was he not an environmental attorney? That helped clean up the East River. Yeah, I don't know all of his track record and accolades, but I think he's going to be more on the health side. But I would say too that having somebody with his track record for the environment can't be a bad thing. I think you're going to see a diverse mix of people on this administration. It'll be interesting. Overall, my attitude towards these things, it's nothing I can control. So we just got to keep building our business, right? We just got to keep moving forward and doing what we can to add value, not only to homeowners, but installers, and do what we think is best for our families and environment, local community and so on and so forth. So I still think rooftop solar in particular makes a ton of sense. I think Tesla is certainly leading the charge in BIPV. The problem now is it's just a luxury product. It's very expensive, but over time, I see that as being a staple for new homes and net zero homes. So again, we're just getting there. 4% of the electricity generated in the country is from solar, I believe. It's something like that. I think it's just under 4% of rooftops. And if you take California out of that, it's even lower.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a huge opportunity when you talk about rooftop solar. Just use Google Maps and you'll be surprised how many rooftops don't have solar. And obviously certain states are requiring, if you put new roof or new construction, to look at solar, like California and New York City. Nate, I thought you made a great point. At the end of the day, we can't control a lot of things in this world. But what we can control is adding value, right, to your customers, taking the appropriate actions to get to a certain point. And obviously, I think everyone has to constantly be adapting and changing, especially with the new industry, even though we don't think it's so new. And yeah, we all have to just get better, right? And do the best that we can and put the effort that we can to do the best that we can and to add value to the clients. And, that will fix many of the things that people want to be fixed. The other thing too, I thought was interesting, you mentioned the EV tax credit. I think Tesla doesn't qualify for the EV tax credit for some of their vehicles. I forget how, it's actually pretty complicated how
he changed the price. So they all qualify now. Well, except for the X Plaid, I believe. I don't know if that one still does. But the X, he lowered to $1 below what the threshold was to qualify. I mean, I bought a Tesla this year and it qualifies. I have a Y. So I know the Model 3 qualifies, and the Y was, I believe, the best-selling car. You can fact check this, but I think is the best-selling car in the world last year. They still do get a lot of tax credits, but those aren't just Tesla, right? They apply to a lot of the EVs. Anyway, I'm pretty sure most of them applies to most of them, if not all of them. I can't remember for the X Plaid. That one, not entirely sure on anymore.
Yeah. I mean, as a Tesla alumni, they still are selling regular solar panels. If you go to a Tesla store, they're also selling like the solar panels and the Tesla Powerwall, because obviously if you have an EV, it's ideal for you to have, a solar system at your house so that you could charge your vehicle as well. So I've heard Elon in the past talk about the benefits, obviously, of solar. Obviously, he started SolarCity with his two cousins, and I reported to Lyndon, his cousin. So I still think, even though he's in the Doge committee, I still think he has a lot of influence outside of just that with the new administration. So we'll see.
So just to fact check it, the Plaid does not qualify, as I said. The base price is, call it $93,000. And for SUVs, vans, and trucks, it has to be $80,000 or less. So I believe what he did was, and maybe this has changed, he made the normal X like $79,999 or something like that. So it just barely qualifies. And then it's $55,000 for all other vehicles. So whether it's the Model 3 or whatever other EV, so any sedan would be capped at $55,000 to get the $7,500 tax credit.
And then obviously there's used EVs. How much is it?
4, I think. Yeah, that was new under Biden. I don't know. That's an interesting one because cars are a little bit different asset class, but imagine if you could take tax credit on a rooftop solar system and then sell it to somebody else, and then they also take the tax credit. I don't know. That one's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting too. And also, like, the used car market in the US is actually pretty depressed, especially for EVs. So it could be an opportunity, going forward to take advantage of the credit. I don't know how long it lasts for. But yeah, I mean, this has been a great interview, Nate. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to discuss about the election?
No, again, hope that it's not coming across that I'm favoring one party or candidate than the other. I just wanted to bring to light some of the high level, like even if you cut through policy, right? What happened under both administrations and how is that positive and negative? Because there's positive and negatives to both. Yeah, I think the message is we just got to keep moving forward as an industry, keep doing good work in, as we talked about, adding value, lowering energy costs, and cleaning up the environment as much as we can. I mean, that's what I'm always in favor of, people. I'm sure you do too, like people find out you're renewables, and I can't tell you how many times I get the whole global warming, it's not man-made. I mean, you can't argue the earth is obviously getting hotter. We've talked about this, I think, on this podcast before. It's like the last 20 years are the hottest 20 on record. And I get that there's fluctuations, but I always say take away whether it's man-made or not. Let's just remove that argument. We all agree the earth is getting warmer, and we all agree that it'd be probably worse if the earth was getting cooler. But how are you not in favor of cleaner air and cleaner water? I would like to hear a real argument, not some fringe thing, but a real argument about the difference in emissions from solar or wind or even nuclear versus coal and gas, right? Like, shouldn't we want to slant toward technologies that are very obviously better for the environment instead of getting hung up on this one issue as whether the humans are making the earth warmer or not? How about I just want to not be able to see the air in LA? I think that would be a good win for everybody. Air pollution is, I think, the number one cause of death across the world. So fun fact, but fact check me on that too. It could be wrong, but just that's my point. I think we need to be focused on what really matters. And that's having a clean energy mix, having generally low energy costs to incentivize manufacturing, to lift people out of poverty. And we got to do it responsibly as possible. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's my perspective. So,
yeah, I agree with you, Nate, on those things. And if people wanted to learn more or be in contact with you, Nate, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. You can send direct all your hate messages there. So I'm teasing. It's like, I feel like you can't, in this world that we live in, you can't say anything remotely positive about Trump. And not that this was directed at him in general, again, just stating what has happened under his previous administration versus now, just comparing and contrasting. But certainly you could go find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a conversation. I always appreciate other points of view. I'm sure there's aspects of it, we're way high level here. I'm sure there's aspects that we're missing and I haven't considered. But overall, I guess some advice I could give to anyone starting a business is you can never operate out of fear, right? If you operate out of fear, you're going to make decisions that aren't correct. And ultimately, it's going to lead you down a bad path. So instead, you got to look at what's the challenge and how can we continue to innovate and differentiate to continue to set ourselves apart in this market. And that's what we're going to do. And we'll wait and see what happens under the new administration next year.
Yeah, that is great advice, Nate. I appreciate you sharing that. Even for me, that's great listening to that. And you're right, it's still very early. It's only been 9 days since the election. I'm sure, as time goes on, we'll have better ideas of what specifically the new administration, how they look at the renewable energy industry. And we'll obviously keep you updated. We're not involved in policy. This is just two entrepreneurs having a discussion about the election, because I have been on some of the calls with policy people, and obviously it's a, very different sort of conversation, but being very high level here.
All right, but guys, before the goal is to increase the amount of renewables. Would we agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
If you just had to boil it down, do you think we'll have more renewables in 2025 than 2024 by relative, higher growth percentage in 25 than 24?
I think so, yes.
So do I. Good ending spot.
Case closed. Well, thank you again, Nate. I appreciate this is Nate's 13th episode of co-hosting the podcast with him. Definitely check him out. And obviously, this is just a discussion. We would love to hear your feedback. And thank you for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast. The Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Reneu Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@reneuenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick Podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.